Folks, the white domestic terrorist who killed 10 black people at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, has been indicted on multiple federal hate crime charges. This follows, of course, the indictments in state court. These new charges include 10 counts of hate crime resulting in death, 3 counts of hate crime involving bodily injury, 10 counts use of a firearm to commit murder during and in relation to a violent crime, 3 counts use and discharge of a firearm during a violent crime, first degree domestic terrorism, 10 counts of first degree murder as well, and the charges go on and on and on. This shows you that, of course, prosecutors are not playing around when it comes to hitting him with every potential charge possible. I want to bring up my panel right now to talk about this, as well as to discuss other stories today. Glad to have folks on the show with me here. Benjamin Dixon, of course, journalist, has his own digital show, joins me here in Atlanta. Glad to have Ben here. We have A. Scott Bolden, the former chair, National Bar Association, lawyer there in Washington, D.C. Robert Patillo, he is the executive director of the Rainbow Push Coalition Peachtree Street Project from Atlanta. Where you at? You in Chicago today?
No, I'm in Atlanta. Y'all ain't telling me what came down.
No, that's a lie. You know, doggone well, we told you to bring your behind down here. Don't even front, Robert. Don't even front.
Hey, Robert,
okay.
He didn't want you. He know you're based in Atlanta. He just didn't want you.
No, I was told Robert was in Chicago, so he could host from the show from Atlanta. I was supposed to be in Philadelphia today for Ada LaVert's 80th birthday party. That was a family emergency. The party got canceled, so I decided to stay. Because then, when Robert said he couldn't host, then Ben said he could actually do it. And so, since I didn't go to Philly, I'm here as well. So, Robert, stop fronting. I think you're trying to hide from somebody. Don't even front. All right, let's get right to it. Yeah, Robert tried to tell somebody he's somewhere when he really still in Atlanta. I got you. All right, bill collector's chasing you. All right, let's talk about these charges. You know, Scott, early on, there were all of these people who lost their minds when initially prosecutors indicted this white domestic terrorist on one charge of murder. And I kept telling people, can y'all just breathe? I mean, that was just the initial indictment. We're now seeing you get the state indictments. Now you have these federal indictments against this white domestic terrorist.
Yeah, you know, most people forget about there's a speedy trial piece that you have to meet, not at trial per se, but you also have to indict him within a certain period of time. And when it's a mass shooting, it takes time to gather evidence and to meet with all the investigators and to walk the scene. So indicting them on one charge, you're absolutely right about that. There were going to be other charges. Now he's got state charges and federal charges. It'll be interesting to see, because you always ask me this question, who's going to go first, Scott? And there's no hard or fast rule. The state and law enforcement and federal law enforcement will get together and figure out which one's going to go first. Usually the state goes first, and then the defendants wind up pleading to the federal charges. So we'll have to see how that all pans out.
And Robert, remember, in the Ahmaud Arbery trial, the state went first, and then the feds went second. Same thing happened in the Derek Chauvin case in Minneapolis.
Absolutely, and even the Walter Scott shooting in South Carolina, they do the state level charges. Once there's conviction for that, often they plea, as Scott said, to the federal charges. And I think what's important here is understanding the importance of having a functioning Justice Department for once. Just remember what the Justice Department was under Jeff Sessions. For all the people who say, well, why do we vote? Why does it matter whether or not we vote? Why does it matter who's in federal office? When Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General, they spent more time going after cases of white discrimination rather than prosecuting civil rights violations. Having an actual functioning Justice Department now where we can actually count on federal charges in cases like this is a very important backstop, particularly when there are local prejudices and you're uncertain whether or not you can get a conviction on the state and local level. Having that federal backstop is very important. I think what the family needs to know is that the full weight of the federal government is behind them, is supporting this prosecution. And regardless of what happens on the state level, this individual will never see the light of day again for the rest of his life.
or the death penalty for that matter. We haven't talked about that yet.
And that being really is, something that is important, because when we look at these stories, we look at these cases, I mean, African Americans want to ensure there's going to be justice that is served. And again, we see the difference when you have Democrats running the Department of Justice compared to Republicans. And we also see how people are responding to white domestic terrorism.
Yeah, absolutely, Roland. One of the things that stands out to me the most about this is the fact that the motions of justice, they are in motion. However, the thing that this shooter did was to make a manifesto saying that he would be taken alive, that it would work out exactly the way that he thought it would be. So while this is a victory, we need these hate crime charges. We have to keep an eye on the ball that this guy is really, there's a movement here. There's a movement here of people who want to harm black people, and I think they need to go the distance with this trial.
So this is again, when you look at this case here, for all of these people out here, again, who kept talking about, when we're going to see an anti-black, we're not seeing a response to black hatred. No, you're seeing it in this case here. And let me remind people, a week after the shooting, the House actually passed a bill dealing with domestic terrorism. The Senate is actually blocked it. It was blocked 47-47. They will not break the filibuster for it. So there has been a response to this terror attack against black people. That actually has happened, Scott.
Yeah, but Roland, what's interesting is everyone will come together and on a bipartisan basis, but it has to be a heinous crime. They don't get, people that don't look like you and me don't get the everyday racism and police brutality that black and brown people go through. They can understand George Floyd. They can understand the New York mass shooting, and they'll say, okay, we got to do something about that. But the everyday just misses them as well as their constituents. The other question I think is fair is, how does this defendant get taken alive, right? I'm not going to compare whether he should have been killed or not, but it begs the question, because whether the federal government is going to implement the death penalty or not will be one of the three decisions law enforcement has to make, or at least the prosecutors. One, is the state going to go first? Are the feds going to go first? And by the way, regardless of who goes first, are you going to ask for the death penalty or not? We've seen some reports where the families of the victims have been urging law enforcement, at least in a couple of reports I saw, that they didn't want them to seek the death penalty. But in the end, the feds and the state will take the families' views of the world on this into consideration. But if there was ever a case that merited this type of criminal prosecution and death sentence, in my opinion, right? And I'm an anti-death penalty, this would be one that I wouldn't object to, if you will. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. There'll be great debate about that once this defendant is convicted.
And Roland, I think also it's important
today. Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other thing that people need to look at is how the FBI and how the Department of Homeland Security investigate the terrorist network that he was potentially a part of. We still haven't figured out how exactly an 18-year-old from humble means was able to purchase level 4 body armor, ballistic helmet, filming equipment, ammunition, rifles, those sorts of things, and also the length of his manifesto to people he was chatting with online. The question is, how deep does this go and what network would you connect to? What we just saw last week, the 30 people in the U-Haul arrested in Idaho, headed to the Pride Parade. Those same people they have found out were fighting over in Ukraine with the Azov Battalion, because that's how deep these networks of white supremacists are attached to around the world. So let's not just take this as just a lone wolf, mentally disturbed young person they try to write it off as. We need to figure out how far this goes, because the fact, just look at what happened to us when we did not take the first attack on the World Trade Center seriously. They came back later with 9/11. Let's not just write off these one-off attacks as if they're not going to come back later with more people after they learn from this event.
Well, folks, today, Attorney General Merrick Garland, he visited the makeshift memorial that has been at that Tops grocery store, and he talked about what the Department of Justice was going to do to ensure justice is served in this case.
In the days and weeks since the attack, we have all witnessed the strength of this community's bonds, its resilience, and its love. I am humbled to have just felt that firsthand in my discussions with the families. Hate-fueled acts of violence terrorize not only the individuals who are all attacked, but entire communities. Hate brings immediate devastation, and it inflicts lasting fear. At the Justice Department, we view confronting hate crimes as both our legal and our moral obligation. The Justice Department was founded more than 150 years ago with the first principal task of protecting Black Americans and our democracy from white supremacist violence. Today, we approach that task with the same degree of urgency as we did then. We fully recognize the threat that hatred and violent extremism pose to the safety of the American people and American democracy. We will be relentless in our efforts to combat hate crimes, to support the communities terrorized by them, and to hold accountable those who perpetrate them. No one in this country should have to live in fear that they will go to work or shop at a grocery store and will be attacked by someone who hates them because of the color of their skin. Someone who commits that act because he subscribes to the vile theory that only people like him belong in this country. And no one in this country should have to bury a loved one because of such hate.
Of course, Payton Gendron is that white domestic terrorist who has been charged in this particular case. All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low-Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk, and we fight.
It's time for a change!
Reconstruyamos esta gran nación!
See, we are people of resilience. As we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.